Malaysia News.
Kuala Lumpur, capital of the Federation of Malaya, which 4 years ago became an independent member of the Commonwealth. Half its people are Chinese, half Malays. They live in the center of Southeast Asia. Since the end of the war in Korea, Indochina and Malaya, things have been quiet. But observers expect a communist offensive in Vietnam and Laos, and possibly Cambodia, when the rains stop. To fight communism, the Malayan Prime Minister has suggested a plan to link Malaya, Singapore, Sarawak, Brunei and North Borneo into a greater Malaysia. This plan got an overwhelming vote of confidence in the Malayan Parliament, and it was a personal triumph for Tunku Abdul Rahman, the 59-year-old Prime Minister who's led the country since independence. His government, an alliance of moderate Malays and Chinese, has done better than many die-hard colonials expected. From this simple office, the Tunku guides the destinies of Malaya. Nigel Ryan asked him what was the idea behind the Malaysia plan.
Well, the main object of Malaysia plan is to give independence to those countries who have been invited to join this Malaysia. And that would end colonialism in this part of the world and give no opportunity to the communists to work and poison the minds of people there, because their main ground for working against the British and American is to bring it to the people that they are the slaves, and therefore, as a result of that, they managed to have a footing in that country and then expend their propaganda, their something. And therefore, we thought, if these people can join us, they'll be independent, and therefore the communists would have no more opportunity to poison the mind of the people in those countries.
Do you think there is a serious threat of communism in this part of the world?
Well, as you know, the threat is very, very serious. Even at this moment, they are using an army of something like 20,000 people in Vietnam to try and overrun Vietnam. And if Vietnam, things get very bad there, it's bound to have repercussion here. And the next thing, before we know where we are, we'll find the communists here.
Do you plan to form a non-communist or an anti-communist Malaysia?
Well, I have made my stand quite clear, and that is that Malaya is anti-communist. Therefore, if we have Malaysia, that means the Malaysia as a country, as a nation, is anti-communist.
What is your position about the use of the British bases here for SEATO purposes?
Well, I've made my views quite known about that. We are not in SEATO, therefore the bases here cannot be used for SEATO defense or any of the SEATO purposes. We, Malaya and Britain, have a defense treaty by which the bases here can be used for Commonwealth defense purposes. That means for Commonwealth purposes, but not for SEATO.
So why do you feel SEATO is out of date?
In the first place, SEATO is supposed to be a defense pact between the countries of Southeast Asia. Actually, there are only two countries of Southeast Asia in this SEATO. These are Thailand and Philippines. Secondly, by having this organization, you're putting the communists on guard. And so whatever plan you have, you can take for granted the communists is bound to know about it. If you see the communists themselves, they have no such organizations as SEATO or anything like that. They have a strong understanding among the communist country to work together for the benefit of the communist nations. And I think the same thing can be done with regard to countries within the Western Bloc.
So what are you hoping to gain from your visit to London?
Well, there's a lot to be gained because, as you know, Britain is the ruler of these territories like Singapore and the Borneo territories. And before Malaysia can come into being, it must naturally have the understanding, the goodwill, and the agreement of Great Britain to pass the sovereignty over these territories to themselves and to join us afterwards. And that's the idea of going to London to have a talk with the British Prime Minister and the other ministers of the British Cabinet. And my hope is that we don't want to grope about in the dark because we know what has to be done in respect to those territories. If they are going to be given independence, then the only country that can say so will be Britain, Great Britain.
And supposing the British government takes the line that the Borneo territories just aren't yet ready for independence because they don't have a civil service structure to run the country?
If they take that line, I think they'll be making a very big mistake because they took the same line with us. When we asked for independence, the British say, you haven't got the officers to run the civil service, you haven't got that, you haven't got this. But as I told the British, once we got independence, that will be our business, not theirs. And finally, as you realize, after they have given us independence, we beat the communists in no time. And now we are running the country as well as you could expect it to be run.
Independence has made little difference to the material well-being of the people of Malaya. Kuala Lumpur is a boom city, and capital is flowing into this rich country, which has the highest standard of living in Southeast Asia. New banks, new hotels, modern office blocks are the outward signs of an expanding economy. Many Singapore businessmen have moved their headquarters to Malaya to take advantage of the stability and opportunities which lie in the Federation. But only a few years ago, the communists were ambushing and burning lorries on roads like these. In these caves overlooking Kuala Lumpur, they had their hideouts. They based themselves in the jungle, and for 10 years they terrorized the people of Malaya. The war against the communists, which was a tremendous drain on the finances of the country, is over. The economy is back to normal, and people can now move about freely. Tin dredges like this one, which cost £1 million each, are working to capacity. Malaya is the biggest producer of tin in the world, and more than half the industry's capital comes from abroad. The dredge pulls itself around an artificial lake, and to get to it, you have to go by flat-bottomed boat. It's a simple process. The dredge scoops up the rich tin-bearing mud in an endless belt of buckets, and then the tin ore is separated from the mud by washing. About 10,000 people work on dredges like these. When the tin's been extracted, the waste pours out at the back. The tin ore is collected in rubber buckets and taken ashore to be smelted into ingots. In these buckets, a third of the world's tin is collected. Malaya's other great asset is rubber. The government has introduced a vigorous replanting scheme to keep its lead in world markets. There are 3¾ million acres of Malaya looking just like this. During the emergency, the communists slashed many trees and burned down rubber factories. But here again, life is back to normal. Every morning, the estate workers go out to tap the trees and collect the latex which drips into special cups. Over 250,000 people are employed in the rubber industry. Without it, Malaya would be a comparatively poor country. But today, it's comparatively rich. Its multiracial population seem to get on well together. In fact, Malaya is a unique example of a country where 3 races live together in peace. Nigel Ryan asked the Tunku what was the secret of this harmony.
Well, there is no secret at all. All these races, or at least most of them, have been in this country for generations and generations. And all these past generation history tells us that there have been never any bitterness between one race as against another. And therefore, when we got independence, all these 3 races knew that they got to make a home of this country. And if they got to make a home of this country, it's their duty to live with one another at peace and in the best goodwill. And that is what's happening today.
Do you think there's any danger of the balance being upset by, for example, the influx of Chinese from Singapore?
I don't give much thought to racial issue. My main concern is the greater danger is the communist aggression, communist menace. That is the greater danger than just this racial issue.
The Malays, who just slightly outnumber the Chinese, are mainly devout Muslims. Some of them, a small but vigorous section of the community, feel that another million Chinese, which the Tunku's Greater Malaysia plan would let in from Singapore, would swamp their culture and way of life completely. The Chinese already control much of the economy of the country, and there's a gulf between them and the Malays. This woman, like all Chinese, loves pork. To the Malays, pork is unclean and nauseating. Although the Chinese have a higher standard of living than the Malays, they can claim that they're discriminated against. In the civil service, the Malays have a built-in safeguard which keeps them in the majority by 4-1. Nigel Ryan went to see the Malay leader of the Socialist Front opposition, Che Ishak, who lost his seat in the last election. He was imprisoned as a Malay nationalist by the British after the war. Che Ishak's constructive ideas for socialising Malaya seemed vague, but he did tell Nigel Ryan what he and his party thought about the Tunku's Malaysian project.
Well, we agreed to the principle of the plan, and we hope that details could be discussed by all parties as soon as possible.
The Chinese population in Malaya is nearly as large as the Malay population. Do you foresee any trouble between them?
No, we have lived in peace for generations. However, there might be some people or some politicians who might create unhealthy tension that might lead to racial strife.
Do you think this can be avoided?
It must be avoided, and it could be avoided.
A powerful voice in the land is the National Union of Plantation Workers, the largest union in Malaya. Its president is a Malayan of Indian descent, Mr. P.P. Narayana. Nigel Ryan asked him what changes, if any, he would like to see in Malaya.
We have now got political independence, but if the political independence should have any meaning, then we must also have economic independence. And towards that end, naturally, the ordinary working people would like to have better wages, better working conditions, greater opportunities to send children to school, facilities for further education in places like the University of Malaya.
Indians in Malaya are in a minority, and they'll be in a greater minority in Malaysia. Do you feel there's any danger of their being swamped by Malays and Chinese?
You see, this is complete nonsense to discuss about Indians, Chinese and Malays after 1957. When, say for example, a Malayan of Indian origin goes to Sweden and makes a speech, Nehru cannot have any claim over that man. He is no more an Indian, he is a Malayan. And it is a stupid way of looking at things. We are molding a nation of our own. No doubt we know that there is different cultures that has gone to make this nation. But I don't think there will be anybody here who will be thinking in terms of Indians, Malays and Chinese anymore. And it is a very stupid way of looking at things.
This may be a pious hope, for in Malaya there are many cultures and creeds. Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians. In this Chinese temple a few days ago, they were celebrating the festival of the 9 gods. These people believe that the gods will protect them in the coming year, and the ceremony is designed to propitiate the gods and invoke their blessing. More people come to watch than to take part. The symbol of the gods hangs in a tree. As the excitement works up, the spirits of the gods take possession of the worshippers. When they are in a trance, these people mutilate themselves, but one of the mysteries of the ceremony is that no marks are visible afterwards. Some Malayans address themselves to strange gods, others to a white ball. If the various races in Malaya have their differences, they're often settled amicably at the weekend. There's never been a colour bar in Malaya, and there isn't one today. Once the exclusive refuge of Europeans, the Mok Tudor Selangor Club is now open to all who can afford it. The University of Malaya has fine modern buildings and little racial divisions. The government's best answer to the problem of multiracialism is education. The aim is free primary education for all, and secondary education mainly in Malay and English. Education is designed to give a Malayan outlook. By living together and working together, young people of all races are learning the tolerance without which Malaya cannot exist, and the know-how to run the country. Teaching staff comes from every race in Malaya and from many different parts of the world. Nigel Ryan went to talk to Uncle Abdul Aziz, Professor of Economics and a world expert on the economics of Southeast Asia. He asked Professor Aziz what he felt about the plan for a greater Malaysia.
Well, as a long-term plan from the Malayan point of view, I should say ultimately it will be to our benefit. But within that long term, we may have a number of setbacks, because if we bring in the Borneo territories, including Brunei and of course Singapore, then we might find ourselves short of personnel, for one thing, and we may find that all our plans that have been built up in the past few years since independence all have to be rearranged. And this rearranging of plans and developing new ideas may set us back quite a bit in the long term.
The Chinese population of Malaya is almost equal the Malay population. Do you think this is a possible cause of future racial trouble?
I don't think the problem is so much a racial problem. I think I'm a bit unorthodox in my approach. I think that there is definitely an economic problem that sometimes appears to have racial undertones, or even a racial problem. But really what it is that the majority of the rural people are Malays, and the majority of the people who are trading in rural produce, who are buying the fish and the rubber and so on for the export market, the people who are selling them bicycles and so on, are non-Malays. People who are money lenders are non-Malays, and many of the landlords are non-Malays. And so the rural population, which is largely Malay, as I said, feels exploited by these people, and this gives it a racial bias to those who wish to see it as a racial problem. But actually, there are large numbers of Chinese farmers and Chinese fishermen and Indian farmers and even Indian fishermen who are suffering just as much in poverty as the Malay farmers and fishermen.
And how about religious differences? Do you think they're a possible cause of trouble?
I think religion could be a vehicle for conflict. I think people could use religion to whip up extremist feeling and then use this gradually to build up mass feeling for some sort of very serious conflict, certainly. The thing is that in this country, all the Malays virtually are Muslims, and the non-Malays, a few are Christians, and the rest are either Indian, Hindus, or Chinese who follow animistic or family systems of religion. Now, in this situation, assimilation, that is coming together of people through religion, as you have, for instance, the Chinese and the Thais, or Chinese with Indonesians in parts of Indonesian society where people are not Muslim, this is not possible. So we have to practice religious tolerance, religious understanding, as we have done in Malaya.
Do you think that there will in fact be quite a lot of intermarriage in the future between people who are now Malays and Chinese?
Yeah, there is already considerable intermarriage, and I think it will increase as people come together, and people of the sort of same background come together. In the rural areas there's very considerable intermarriage, and the Malays have adopted very large numbers of Chinese babies for many years.
But basically, the object of Malaya as a nation is to create Malayans rather than Chinese or Malays.
That's right, yes, yes.
The Malayan Prime Minister comes to London this month to ask for immediate independence for the British territories in Borneo and a new federation of Greater Malaysia. As proof of the ability of Malayans to run their own affairs, he can point to the federation's prosperity, its stability, and its plans for the future. The Tunku's forthcoming mission to London may prove to be the turning point in the destiny of Malaysia.